guys. And there we go. Okay. I think we're all here. All right. So, hello, everybody. I'm Tara with Fort Collins Pagan Pride, and I am here with Missy and William, also people with Fort Collins Pagan Pride. They do a lot for us. So, I thought it would be great to take some time to ask them a couple questions and talk to them about Pagan Pride and the pagan community and all that stuff. So, first and foremost, you guys want to introduce yourself?
Reverend Missy Ashton from Mountain Ancestors Grove here in Longmont. This is my lovely husband, William.
I'm Reverend William Ashton. Same grove, same place.
So, you guys have been working with Pagan Pride for a long time. What drew you to the Pagan Pride project in the first place?
So I was involved in Pagan Pride in Ohio before I moved here. It was an institution I was familiar with, and I had seen how important it was to connecting different pagan groups, pagan spirited groups with one another, and to be a resource for solitaries and informational for folks who are seeking. Because a lot of our groups are very geographically spread out, or they're not necessarily hosting a lot of open to the public events, and so they didn't get to see each other very often. And that I thought that just creating that space for people to be in community for that time in person was really important.
Oh, it really is. William?
For me, I was first introduced to the idea of Pagan Pride after I'd moved to Colorado. Louisiana didn't have pagan prides, but I'm also almost 50 years old, so it may have been a while. So when I was first starting my ministry here in Colorado, before I was ordained, I was looking for different ways to meet other pagans, just kind of take a pulse of the local pagan community. And after going to different meetups, I heard that the Denver Pagan Pride was happening. So I decided to go check it out, and then I got involved with an ADF group in Denver, and then continued to invest in it and have a booth and all this type of thing. But originally it was to make contacts as someone who was going to be doing work in the community, but really didn't have a good idea of who's in the community, what the vibe of the community was. So that's how I first came to at least the local Pagan Pride stuff here. So.
No, I think you both brought up that great point about community and coming together, and that both, you know, covens and groups and solitaries can all come together and kind of get together, and that's a great point. Good job, guys. So, other than bringing that community together, what are some other things that you guys feel are important about Pagan Pride?
I think I'd like to specifically state networking. You know, meeting with other, like we for example, we started working with Fort Collins because it's so much closer to us, and there's a wide group of folks north of us in Wyoming even who don't have access to this sort of thing, who would otherwise not have known. Some of the vendors are out here, some of the musical acts are out here that are sharing pagan spirited music. You know, it's an important place for people to show others what they're offering to the community, because we don't have any other like single place to go and find resources. You have to rely on internet searches, which aren't always very helpful, because if you're new and you don't have a lot of hits yet, then you're not going to show up at the top, and you're going to end up with a lot of groups that are national or international. And if you really want to stay and shop locally and meet with other local pagans to do group work together, it's a great way to just reach out to the people who are in your space. And that's super important.
No, it really is. I think that I've done all my networking starting through Pagan Pride, and it's been a lot of fun. I met a lot of great people who own businesses and host groups and all that stuff. And so, what about you, William?
Would you ask me the question again? I got caught up in Missy's answer. It's just so melodic that I totally tuned out. I'm sorry. Would you remind me the question again, please?
Other than like building community, what's important about Pagan Pride?
I think one of the most important potential things about Pagan Pride as an idea, as an organization, as an individual group. I don't think it's been manifested yet. When you look at some of the other small communities, marginalized communities, when they start to get involved with pride, there is a certain amount of we're proud of who we are and we're not ashamed of it and things like that. And I don't think that pagans have kind of caught on to that yet, because pagans of the modern age have not faced the same struggles that our ancient 5,000 year ago ancestors have. We are literally not being burned at the stake in America. There's other places in the world where if you get accused of witchcraft, they'll stone you to death, they'll burn you to death or whatever. But as American pagans, first of all, the majority of us are white folks. So we adopt this diasporic religion, but we don't really know what to do with this new status. Like, we take on the status of marginalization, but you would never know it walking through the world. So I think the pride in who we are as pagans has yet to be discovered. The pride of those things that bring us together. The pride of how we can have such a diverse, different community, but all be under the same umbrella. Like, we haven't figured that out yet. We talk a lot about it, but like the highest ideal, I'm still hoping and working toward awakening that in the greater pagan community. God's be good, it happens within my lifetime.
No, I think that Pagan Pride is a good step towards doing that, because I agree. I think that there's still a lot of solidarity and separation in the pagan community. And even when we do come together, it is, we don't know what to do with that. We just, like, we're here, and now what? And totally. I think that doing Pagan Pride helps us kind of facilitate that pride and know, okay, all right, here, let's move forward. Let's do this as a group. Let's see the things that everybody else is doing that we can be proud of, and that we can begin to build that community.
You bet.
I think one thing that is a good sign of us moving in the right direction, specifically that I've seen at Fort Collins Pagan Pride, because of where we choose to set up, we have a lot of visitors who walk through the park who are not pagans, who don't identify as pagans, or don't have, some of them haven't even heard of paganism. They don't really know what it means. So we've had a lot of really wonderful opportunities to educate folks on who we are and how diverse we are and how many of us there are in this community and how integrated we are into that local place. Because, being local centric is really important to people in Colorado, and showing them that we're here, we're part of the same community, is really useful for building bridges with non-pagans and other folks who are super important and doing great work in our community, so that we can expand ourselves beyond just our own people, but with the entire community where we live.
Right.
No, and I love where we set up in the park downtown, because we'll even get people who come up who are like, I'm pagan and I didn't even know this was happening. This is amazing. Yeah. And that's always like, I'm like, yes, welcome. You were meant to be here today. So
yeah.
So, all right. You guys have been working with Pagan Pride for a long time, and specifically to Fort Collins Pagan Pride. What have you seen change over the years?
Oh, we've gotten a lot bigger really fast. I think I've really enjoyed watching us expand and just seeing how many folks up on this side of the state really needed an outlet for this. We've had more and more groups coming down from Wyoming. I met some folks from, was it Montana last year?
Wow.
Not Montana, Nebraska, somewhere. I met a lot of people, so I was serving food. It was hard to remember. But I met some people from unexpected distances away who saw what we were doing and wanted to support that. And so, and I'm hoping that our vision of having more and more big name pagans come in and just continuing to expand this and really incorporate more of the community will continue to happen.
I gotta say, I really, other than like a couple of people like turning over in positions, I can't say that it's changed that much. And I kind of think that's a good thing. My observation, at least. I mean, aside from like a couple of players like changing out, it was a good model to begin with. Like, I think the vision that Fort Collins Pagan Pride had at the beginning, not necessarily like the Dalai Lama. I know that's kind of like one of Jordan's dreams, to have the Dalai Lama come and visit our Pagan Pride.
Okay, we'll do that for Jordan. It'll happen.
However, a lot of the how we approach people, how we present ourselves as an organization, like that was set up clean and good in the beginning. And really, we've just reinvested in that same vision. So I think if anything has changed, we've really gotten stronger and developed more of a solid identity as a Pagan Pride organization, as Fort Collins Pagan Pride, to differentiate ourselves from another Pagan Pride group. It seems like other Pagan Pride groups every year are trying to like thematically find themselves, going on an identity adventure, and it's like every year they're doing this, but it seems like at Fort Collins, it's a similar offering every year, and each year it gets more rich. It's like something that you like let sit for a bit, and all the flavors come together, and it like texturally changes, and it actually becomes a dish as opposed to a bunch of ingredients in a pot. And I really think that's one of the strengths of Fort Collins Pagan Pride. So if it's changed at all, I think it's just gotten stronger. I think it's just gotten deeper and better and richer and more complex. But ultimately, it's the same thing, which is good.
That's a beautiful perspective.
Beautiful. I love that. It's like an aging wine or a fine dish. Like it's just coming together even better. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
So as my first time meeting William, well, I met both of you at Pagan Pride, but my first time meeting William was at Denver Pagan Pride. He was doing a presenter on, he didn't need any more magic rocks and about building.
What the was.
It just stuck with me. I can't help it. But
that's what stuck out.
Community and paying your clergy and taking care of your community in more ways than just offering good energy, because we can all offer good energy. But it takes more than that to build a community, especially when we're talking about our clergy and our spiritual growth. And in bringing that philosophy into Pagan Pride, how do you kind of see that happening, I guess, with Pagan Pride and building that kind of community that facilitates more than just magic rocks being exchanged?
Oh, that one's for me. Okay.
For you, William, how do you see that Pagan Pride doing that? Because I think that's a really important thing that needs to be incorporated more into our community building. Because when it comes to like the networking that Missy was talking about, and really all of us coming together, that we need more than just an exchange of energy. It has to be real community building. And how do you see Pagan Pride really facilitating that?
Okay. So first, let me clarify by saying the title of my presentation was not, I don't need any more damn magic rocks. I was presenting in professional clergy. And it's like, if you're going to come to the table with these services, then it's like you invested real resources into acquiring this knowledge. And it's not like, I cleaned my high priestess's house kind of thing. It's like, no, I gave a college like 100,000 fakakta dollars to learn about these skills and, to develop myself as a being to be of service. So that was the presentation.
It was wonderful. It was amazing. It was like 10 years ago and it still sticks with me. That's how it was.
Thank you. So I think one of the challenges in the pagan community that prevents us from getting to that place is that, unlike the Jewish community, who will always first pull out like the Jewish phone book, and if you need a plumber, it's Mordecai the plumber. If you need a electrician, it's a Jewish electrician. And we keep it in the community, but it seems like our community is built up of like, it's not as secularly diverse, it seems. It seems like there's a boatload of homemakers, myself being one of them. There's a boatload of people in IT, computer stuff. Like, my God, if I meet another pagan who's just like, oh yeah, I can come to your internet, I'm like, I don't need that. What I need is a check. What I need is some cash. And we haven't figured out that the feel-good part of the rock that you get feels good for the giver and not necessarily for the receiver. And if a gift only feels good for the giver, then it's all ego. Then really you're just giving that gift so you feel better, as opposed to doing the right thing so that that other person feels better. So much of the pagan experience, I fear, has, because we have the freedoms that we do, because we are the wild children who don't like boundaries and rules and things, we don't have boundaries and rules and things. We don't have expectations. Like, for example, in the Jewish community, I use the Jewish community a lot, not Jewish. However, I spent 4+ years studying exhaustively the Jewish community, its religious practices, how they did what they did, how they come together. And really, there's more of a similarity, other than like core theological differences, but community-wise, pagans could be as strong as the Jewish community.
Right.
The Jewish community, when it first started thousands of years ago, kind of like where we're at, was different tribes and different groups and everything else. And it wasn't until they looked at each other and said, we're going to let this one commonality bring us together, and it's going to hold all of our differences as well. And they did, and it took thousands of years to do it. We could do it faster only because we know history, and because we read history, and because we don't want to repeat history. So there's that part of it. There's a certain level of overfamiliarity, I think, in the pagan community, and it's because of that no boundary, which is why when I introduce myself as Reverend William Ashton. And when somebody's like, oh, hey, Bill, I'm like, it's either Reverend Ashton or William, please. Well, and there's a reason for that. It's because, the reason for this, the best illustration I can give, there's a friend of mine that went to a university in Annapolis called St. John's College. It's a pretty famous American college. And they study a particular thing, and you only get one degree. It's a real awesome thing. Look it up, St. John's College. However, one of the rules that they had at St. John's College is you never called anyone by their first name. It was always Mr., Ms., or Mix. I guess now they would put a gender inclusive one in, and their surname. Because what people have said is, it's a lot easier to go, Tara, you're full of crap, than it is to go, okay, Mrs. Waddle, I would like to, as soon as you make it professional, your professional lexicon is in place and you're pulling professional words out, as opposed to, girl, you're full of shit, right? There's so much of that. There's so much of that community that I think that's harmful to us. And I think part of what Pagan Pride can do to help facilitate this is to keep doing what we're doing, because we carry ourselves differently. Fort Collins Pagan Pride is very professional. We treat each other with a tremendous amount of respect. Deadlines. I mean, it's more businessy from what I've seen. I was privileged enough to go to a couple of Denver meetings, and it's nothing like it. So I think we could take those strengths. I think we could take those things and start deploying it within our Pagan Pride community, within that Northern Colorado Pagan Pride community, and start to make that change happen.
So some of the practical things that we do is that we to implement these ideas is that we do have a functional board of directors, for lack of a different term.
This is for our church group.
No, Fort Collins Pagan Pride.
Oh, my bad.
Fort Collins Pagan Pride. We don't refer to ourselves as a board of directors, but from a nonprofit standpoint, we do have a board of individuals who each take on different responsibilities and report back to one another, so that we can all not be working on the same thing and leaving something else off, so we can keep track of everything that needs to be done. We are working toward very strong financial background. We are trying to pay our presenters. Right now, we are only in a place where we can pay our keynote speaker, but over time, we would love to pay people for the services that they offer to us. Right. We're trying to look at this as a very professional place that we are upholding that that stance that we are professionals in our religion, and what we do has validity, and it is a legitimate actual path. We have a 501c3 as Pagan Pride, so it's a very sound organization, and we have a fantastic framework and foundation to build the type of relationship with the pagan community and the practitioners that we have that William's describing.
Well, and I know dealing with the vendors, they have a very different experience dealing with Fort Collins Pagan Pride than they do with the other
pagan prides.
And even like, I was talking to the Colorado Springs Pagan Pride changed hands and is now something else, and that's not what it is, but it's just everything there's a lot of changing that happens throughout the year and the years of other organizations. And I think that both of you kind of hit on the fact that it's a stable foundation that was built and the idea is there, and you've just built on that same idea of professionalism and integrity and acceptance more than just tolerance. Like, this is about accepting all people for what they're doing and building this great community. So
Sarah, if I could add on the other side of that, though, like, it seems like that's one side of the coin. On the other side of the coin, I think one of the things that we have is accountability. We hold each other accountable. Like, if I don't do something, and if I show up, like my mom's in face, if you show up with nothing and people are expecting you to have something, I know that my cohort of leaders at Fort Collins Pagan Pride will hold me accountable.
Right.
William, you said you would do this. William, blah, 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 blah. William, et cetera, et cetera. I know that team will hold me accountable. And I believe that the rest of the team knows that I will do the same with them. And not just like wait until they fail and be all, ha-ha, but see them struggling, like we check in with one another. Hey, you got everything okay? The dialogue is completely open. The transparency is wonderful. So we're already treating each other with a different level of respect on one side of the coin, but also we hold one another to a standard.
Right.
Yep.
And I think that's another thing. Like, we're very accepting, and if you're too accepting, then it's idiot acceptance, right?
Right.
You need to have discerning acceptance. And I think that there's a certain amount of grace that one could give another person from making a mistake or forgetting something. But if it's a pattern, the team at Fort Collins Pagan Pride, I'm confident, would hold one another accountable.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right. So I think
There's more.
we're talking with you guys because it always ends up being a long time. You guys have so much to say. So as pointing towards just specifically to the community and not Pagan Pride, but to the pagan community, what do you guys think is important for the pagan community? And because it is something that is being built right now. They say we're practicing the ancestral ways, but this is a modern religion.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. So as our modern neo-pagan, I guess we could say, and all of the umbrella term that it is, how do you see that, the importance of that community?
How do I see the importance of the community?
Yeah. What do you see as the importance of that community, and why
it's important?
Yeah. Why we need to continue to build that community?
Why we need to keep paganism and paganism together.
What a great way to say that. And
let's see.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, you want to? If you got something, yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
So, trying to keep this short.
We have magnificently failed at short.
Yeah, it's fine. So I presented to the community it was a 2-part workshop on the axial awakening, and it's
a whole thing.
So it was a 6-hour workshop. So it's the period of time, to sum up, from about 900 BCE to about 300 BCE, where a tremendous amount of psychological and community-based change happened throughout the European world.
Buddhism, the solidification of Judaism,
branching over into the East. There's evidence for widespread, rapid, like awakening to happen.
Right.
And one of the strengths of our polytheistic view of the world is that each of these groups who have these very important and foundational belief systems, or practice systems that have been inspired by things that have come from the axial awakening. 900 BCE was when was right about when the Vedic folks were moving from pre-Vedic practices all the way through to the end of it, where they converted their religion into the Hindu practice that you see loosely nowadays.
Shiva Shakti.
Yeah. So when you look at the pre-Vedic stuff and a lot of the early practices that people adopt, there's a whole slew of awakening material and enlightenments that happens to societies that we are looking, we're looking at where they were before that. And as polytheists, we can look at where they were before, we can look at where they went and see which of those practices are most relevant to where we are now and translate those into our modern experience. And each of us does that in a different way, but because we are polytheists, we can see that William practices different than Missy and Tara practices different than William. And each of those paths are equally brilliant and beautiful and diverse, and that is our strength. We are not divided by our diversity. It makes us stronger as a community. And I think that is one of the reasons why the pagan community is so important, because we're what it looks like to accept differences in the people around us, because all of our paths are unique and different, and it's all okay. Like, you do something different than I do, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't stop us from being able to pray at the same fire. And I think that's one of the strengths of our community, is that we can embrace the differences and have that make us stronger.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful.
That's why I like it.
How do you making quotes out of this video?
Feel free.
Why we should keep paganism, and specifically paganism, together. We haven't quite come out of the kind of first turning of American paganism, which is all about the self and the identity and like, this is who I am and take me seriously and this is all real,
Real, that's the big one that I get a lot. Like, is this real? Like, yes,
right.
Actually, this is
right.
real.
Like if you told someone you were Christian, they wouldn't say, "What, guy on a cross? That sounds kind of weird." They'd just be like, "What?" But when you tell people what we do, they're like, "What?" So I think it's important to keep paganism, because we haven't really developed any kind of great theology around what it is that we do. What I mean to say is that most of our time spent paganism is taken up with a lot of decorating, with a lot of creative writing, with a lot of theater and theatric skills.
Small visitor, give me a second.
And very few actual theological skills that what we need to do is really look at what our religion is made of and how those things that we find sacred are just sacred. We haven't found the secret to not make it like my sacred thing and your sacred thing or whatever. Like, it's just the sacred thing. Like, paganism's sacrality comes from just what it already is. And there's no good theological or ministry around what we do. It's one of the things that I work on, but that's because I went to school for this. Like, I've taken classes on homiletics, how to put words together to make people hear them and have them go, oh, shit. Religious words specifically.
That's the best description of that ever.
That's what it is. It's pretty much all it is. But in that, you learn skills of like how to take things out of the lore, which is unchanging for the most part, and put our present day experience through those things. And I don't think there's enough of that. It's such a small current. And what it needs to do is swap spots with the big theatrical things and the creative writing things and the decorator things and the collector things. There was this fascinating article written by, oh my gosh, I can't remember the guy's name. The guy was a economist. He's also pagan. And he did this overview and examination of British pagans, specifically at like pagan shops and things like this, places where pagans frequent, pagan events, and just did years worth of research. And his conclusion after all this research was that pagans, now he's specifically talking about Brit pagans, but it's pagans, man. Pagans approach their religion not as a postulant, not as a religionist, not as any of these things, but as someone would approach a fandom. When I read this paper, I literally got sick to my stomach because he was 100% right. Where do your resources go in a fandom? They don't go to one another, to each other's fans. They go to stuff that is good for you. And that's it.
Right.
I got this tchotchke because this tchotchke is Bridget, and Bridget makes me fucking happy. Oh, and it's next week. I got this other fucking tchotchke. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We approach our religion in the same spirit that people approach a fandom. And I think that's horrible. We haven't quite figured out how to put that part aside and to get into the meat of what a religion does. And that's that. So that's the first turning. The second turning is now, okay, now we are who we are. Everybody agrees on that. Pagans are real. Okay, cool. Now what? Now what are you going to do? You're real. Who cares? A flower's real. A flower can do stuff, though. A flower has purpose. It's got chemicals. You can make tinctures and this and that. It's just beautiful. You can like have its aromas and like you, pagan, what do you do? What do you do, pagan? What do you do for the world, pagan? And we haven't
answered these questions.
Well, we haven't answered those things yet. I mean, maybe pockets and small pagan groups
but not collectively.
But not as a people, because we have a huge issue recognizing ourselves as a people. Because I tell you what, if it gets weird and somebody's like pagan, they're not gonna like make a distinguishing anything between the voodoo people and the witches and the druids and the Santeria people and whatever over here and the eclectic. They're just gonna put they're gonna get the umbrella, and they're gonna be heathens all about.
Right.
And that's what's gonna happen. And then we're gonna be a people. We haven't struggled together. We've maybe struggled in little pockets, but we haven't struggled as a people. And I think facing that struggle will transform us, just like any other sort of initiatory experience, which we're all about, right? Pagans are all about that initiatory experience, man. Tie them up, blindfold them, do the thing, spin them around, whack, 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 whatever initiation thing that is sacred to you. But we haven't become anything. Like we haven't, as a people, evolved. We haven't come out the other side of that experience as a together unit, because there's so much individuation, there's so much identity sickness, there's so much ego that we have a hard time getting past the stuff that just makes us feel good, the spirit pleasuring oneself, versus the actual doing things in the world, and the sweat equity that you put into the world makes you feel good. One is like a drug. Zot, bah, you feel good. One is like working out. This sucks. Oh, God. And then months later, you're like, wow, I feel, you awaken. You have that initiation in your own body, and you're like, I feel completely different. I'm a different being. Oh, my gosh. As opposed to just doing the drug and feeling good and then having to do it again to feel good again, you transform yourself. And we haven't figured out that it's important to put the ego aside so we can do that, because the work's too hard. It's hard work. Religioning is hard work. And a lot of folks who religion, pagans included, do it because it just feels good, and they want something to make them feel good without having to go downtown and buy some drugs.
Religion's better than drugs, so at least
it has a different purpose. But yeah.
Well, I think that brings up a great point.
Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
No, I think you bring up that great point, though, about how we are still building this as a religion in the community, and that we are at this point now. And it so my last question is like the perfect segue into that. Right now, we're faced with this challenge as a community with not only COVID, but also with the issues of discrimination throughout our entire government and in so many places. And as a pagan community, how can we help through the world and to also lead by example and kind of do the right thing and put the right foot forward in these trying times?
Sure.
Oh, yes, there's a lot.
Yes, there's a lot.
I think
an easy question, okay?
Yeah, this is good. I think for me, the first thing that I needed to realize was that just because I have to stay at home doesn't mean there's nothing I can do. I'm not trapped in my house. No one is keeping me here. I have to re-examine, and everything that I do is more purposeful now. And I think that instead of having things just available to us, we now have to seek things out. So the thing that we can start with that's actionable right now is to reach out to those people that we've connected with, to all those people in our network that we've met at Pagan Pride and at other pagan events, and ask them, how are you doing? If someone doesn't show up to our grove for 3 or 4 rituals, we usually hit them up. Hey, how are things going? Are you okay? Do you need anything? If you have people in your community who are who have underlying health conditions and who can't, can you go grab their groceries for them and bring them back to their house? Does someone need their yard cut? There's 4 raging fires right now, and the air quality is terrible. Just because we can't connect with people around our fires does not mean that we're not still part of the community. Just because people aren't coming to gather together doesn't mean we're not still connected. So I think that if I were going to give people one piece of actionable advice, it would be, during this time, to stand together as a community and actually reach out to our connections and see how they're doing and see what we can do with each person to connect right now and make sure everyone has their needs met. We're not trapped. There's nothing keeping us here except for our own desire for this virus not to kill our friends and family.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there's not other ways we can connect. I've seen a lot of people posting rituals online. A lot of groups have been having Zoom and WebEx meetings so that they can continue to operate and to see one another. We just attended a virtual festival last weekend. Dragon Fest was the weekend before that. Mm-hmm. And there are ways that we can still connect, and it's just sometimes a little bit harder to find them right now. But that doesn't mean that they're not still there. And just because we can stay home right now to keep ourselves safe doesn't mean that we should step away from whatever else we can do to make sure that other people have what they need.
Very much so.
Mm. Oh God, I got so much. Okay. So one, we need to realize that the majority of us, no matter how many Cherokee Princess 132nd genetic bullshit that we want to hang on to, realize is that we're white folks and we're ultimately the most privileged class in this country, and we have to do something about that by using the privilege correctly. Let's just start there. Second,
can I add one thing onto that, because it's super
Sure.
pertinent about that? By white people accepting or acknowledging that is not us letting go of something, it's us helping other people up. And
That's exactly right.
That is a big station that when I talk to other white people about their privilege, they're like, well, I'm not letting go of that. I'm like, it doesn't mean let go of anything. It means that everybody else deserves that same common respect and courtesy.
Right.
All of those things.
Right.
And just
Right. It's not pie.
It's not pie, it's sunshine.
That's right.
I think another thing too is, and this is coming from 15 plus years of local stuff, but also, almost 30 years of paganing. Talked to a lot of pagans in that amount of time. It seems to me, I've observed that pagans, as a whole, tend to be smarter than the average bear, more well-read than most folks, and consider themselves very science-minded and smart. Like, we don't believe as pagans that, and maybe we do, and I'm just delusional, but I don't think that there's a pagan in Colorado that believes if they don't make offerings to the sun one day, that the sun won't come up.
Yes.
I bet there's no pagan in Colorado that believes that we live in a geocentric cosmos, that the world is the center.
And it's
guarantee it. I guarantee that there's not a pagan in Colorado that believes those things. And yet our religioning and how we show that to the world is so fantastic and removed from our rational selves that we don't really know the quest for identity is failing because we're not a single thing. We're like these logical minded people who like put on the mundane hat and I'm just a regular person. And then they, take off the hat and they put on their witch hat or whatever. And they're like, waha, and that's not curing your identity. That's actually making it worse. So I think there needs to be a bringing together in a skillful way of the we who we think we are on one side of our pagan experience and the we who we go to work with, right? So there's that. Remember that we are science-minded beings and that we should be setting the example. If we are as smart as we claim to be and science and this and that, and if I would have only had the money, I would have been some great scientist, but I'm a poor pagan or whatever, Common story. We've all heard it before. Well, if you're that damn smart, then start setting the example. One thing we could do is set the example and lead with science. We can lead with the mask stuff. We can lead with talk to our medical professionals and family and friends. Get behind that type of thing. As a people, it's like we're the most backwards ass religion and people ever. Like the sun, pray to the sun or it won't come up. Solstice, Jesus, we don't pray for solstice. It's darkness forever. Like we go out and do that. We throw stuff into fire. We pray all night. But do we really think that if we didn't do that, that the sun wouldn't come up? No, we don't. So that same rational mind needs to be deployed on the other side of our religion too, and not just in the mundane things, but as we need to adopt that as a people. Like that's part of our strength, is our ability to hold the paradox of the fantastic world and the science world. Another thing we could do as a people, and this is the third and last thing, is stop trying to do the stuff that everybody else is doing. That's why nobody gets paid, Tara. You want to know why? Like, I got a bug up my butt about nobody getting like compensated for stuff. It's because when William gives a lecture, then 2 weeks from now, some schmuck who was at my lecture is thinking they're giving the same lecture with the same data and the same spirit and everything else, but they think that they're a better public speaker because they have a degree from like on some theater college or whatever. Look, pagans steal everything from one another and market it as their own, which is why no pagan wants to pay another pagan for any pagan thing, unless it's a thing that they themselves cannot reproduce. You talk to a pagan, it's like, oh, there's a necklace. And instead of, hello, jeweler, this is amazing. I would like to get, I am a computer dork, so I have a bunch of money and computer stuff. You are a jeweler. You have fewer dollars, but a bunch of jewelry that I want. Let's change. It seems like that makes sense. It seems like it's a very easy equation, but it's not. And it's because everybody looks at the jewelry and says, well, shit, I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
or goes to a ritual that someone spent months creating and that they may have a degree in religious studies or theology or whatever. And they go, I could do that. I could do what that guy's doing. I could do what that lady's doing. That's ego. I've said ego 100 times during this conversation, and it's because that is what we are cursed with. Because we don't have those bounds, because we don't have religious leadership saying, yo, tune it back. We don't have that we don't have checks and balances in our community. The closest thing we have is like gossiping vouchsafe, which is just gross. You don't want to hang out with that person because this and that. Girl, you don't know about this person over here. Like, that's ridiculous. That's tacky. That's childlike. We need to grow up as a people, as a collective people. And that's what we could be modeling during these troubling times, is not retreating back into our fantasy selves, but empowering ourselves from those myths and legends and everything else and taking that forward into the world with this world's language. They don't speak our language. And the more we keep trying, I mean, it's like if I went to China and didn't speak Chinese, if I'm yelling at a Chinese person in English and just getting louder and slower, I'm the one that looks like an idiot. It's the same thing with pagans. You can't try to talk to someone and get them to meet you halfway when you start with witch, magic, sacrifice, divination, trance. And if you front load your first sentence with all those, they're going to be like, you need to go get on your +5 Badger and ride the hell out of here, weirdo. Roll your dice or whatever. There's a different way to communicate how and what we do that doesn't turn people off. Because what all those words do, that makes us feel strong. I've got something that you don't. It's egoic sickness. Pagans, drop the ego. Seriously, it's a big deal. It's hurting us. Please, for the love of all that's holy.
Your seriousness makes me want to do a whole nother thing where I just let you talk all the time.
You can Tara, seriously, you can hit me up whenever you want. You can hit me up whenever you want. I got time. You got time. Let's do it.
All right. I will.
I'm in. It's on video. It's recorded. William promised.
Right. Got you. There you go. Integrity.
Integrity.
All right. So, yeah, 47 minutes. We're gonna say farewell. Thank you so much, guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And for everybody who's watching, thank you so much. And if you are looking for Missy or William, you can find them. Their links are on Facebook or on the website. They are with, say your church's name.
Mountain Ancestors. Missy at mountainancestors.org and William at mountainancestors.org.
Perfect. So thank you so much, guys, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Tara.
Thank you.